Hello and welcome to Different Perspectives. I'm Paul Ndiho coming to you live from Washington. Hundreds of protesters have taken to the streets in Tanzania for a second straight day, following a disputed election that has plunged the nation into unrest. Amnesty International reports that at least two people have been shot as demonstrations spread across Dar es Salaam and other cities. The government has responded by shutting down the internet, imposing a curfew, and deploying the military to restore order. On Wednesday's vote saw the ruling party Chama cha Mapinduzi CCM in power since independence in 1961 move to extend its dominance. Two major opposition figures were barred from running, leaving President Samia Suluhu Hassan to face 16 minor candidates who barely campaigned. Earlier results are announced by the electoral body show that President Hassan, with nearly 97% of the vote in the first eight constituencies that were counted, imagine that opposition groups are already rejecting as evidence of manipulation. Joining me live is my former colleague Abdul Shakur Aboud, a veteran journalist and who has been following the latest developments very, very closely in Tanzania. Hello, Shakur. How are you?
Hello, Paul. Nice to see you. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to see you, my good friend. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
So let's start off. Bring us up to speed. What's the situation like on the ground tonight in Tanzania? I've seen a lot of images that we're able to get via social media. It doesn't look good. Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, Paul, thank you very much. As you just said, is that the situation in Tanzania is a big surprise to many. These elections were expected to be one of the most critical elections in Tanzanian history since Tanzania joined multi-party systems in the late 1990s. So these elections have been expected to be followed by riots and demonstrations after the political parties of the opposition called for demonstration and boycott. The leader of Chadema, Tundu Lissu, who is in prison on accusation for treason, had called on the people to not vote, saying that changes needed before elections. So he was arrested for that, and it looks like people listened to him, and yesterday's election was boycotted all over the country per se. And the opposition is still trying to get people together and to continue. The youth have taken over, as you can see, according to pictures we are seeing on media and social media. The situation doesn't look very good. It looks like the youth, the Gen Z of Tanzania, have now taken over, just like what we saw in Kenya. So right now, we know the police has been using strong hands to stop the demonstrations. Dar es Salaam yesterday was under curfew in the evening, and today the demonstration has been going on. But on the other hand, there are some reports saying that the army is with the people. We have seen pictures of the army walking around, but not doing or stopping the demonstration. So it shows that the army could be possible behind the people too.
Oh, wow, that's breaking news for people who are not familiar with the current situation in Tanzania. We are talking about what has transpired since the elections that were held yesterday. If I hear you correctly, you seem to suggest that the army could be on the side of the people, but we don't know that. We cannot establish that because of lack of the internet has been shut down. But from where you are, how can we verify some of that information that you're talking about?
Well, we're verifying the information because on the ground you have international reporters and international media like Reuters, AFP, BBC, which are reliable. We have been working with them. So they are also reporting, and the pictures which they are showing can indicate what is happening. We see a lot of burning yesterday of different police stations. At least 2 or 3 major police stations were burned down, And you could see through the videos they have military walking with the people. So it is an indication, and according to reports, there is a fact that probably the army is split, or probably the army is with the people. It's not clear. Nobody knows exactly. As we know, Tanzania has been a very peaceful country. The army has never intervened in any of those type of protests. It's mostly the police. But this time you see there's a mixture. So there is a signal that something is happening, something is brewing between the army and the police, and we have to figure out how and what is happening.
To your point, you talked about stability. Tanzania has been a very, very stable country, but let's face it, they haven't changed the party structure. It's nearly over 60 years ago. Once they became independent, it's still the same political party. CCM has been at the helm of that country, even though they have had periodic changes at the top where you have somebody else come in to become the president. But in terms of structure, in terms of political party, they've only been the dominant force in Tanzania. Is that correct?
Yes, the CCM has been in power for almost 60 years now. They have been the main political party, even to a point where people say the government is CCM, CCM is the government. And it is true, they have elections between themselves. They have been having presidential changes, respecting the constitution, 2 terms and all that. Samia Suluhu Hassan was going for the 2nd term. She came into power following Magufuli's death 4 years ago. So people have been, people I could say are tired with the structure of CCM. The opposition has been calling for change. When Samia came to power, she was a light of hope. She let open the media, which was contrary to what Magufuli did to a certain extent. She allowed political opposition. She met with the political parties, and there was hope that she will be bringing change. Then suddenly in the middle, things have changed, and now we are seeing kidnapping. We are seeing opposition parties being blocked. As we said, the 2 main opposition party, ACT, was Alendo and Chadema. The candidates have been stopped. They've not been allowed to go. So Samia was going on her own. It was like recrowning herself because there was no opposition. So on the top of the start, when we started the discussion, you said that election body is counting the votes. But when you look at it, definitely she'll get 97% because she's alone in the race.
Interesting. It's like we are talking about 2 different people. The Samia who came in with optimism, promising to change the direction of the country, reaching out to opposition politicians who are in exile. For example, Mr. Tindilusu was in exile, was thrown back into the country. They had a sit down and a handshake, and all that for what? Was it just a show? Because the very same person that we are talking about has gone after these opposition leaders.
You know, Paul, this is what is happening. African leaders sometimes change their position due to different influence around them. And probably at the beginning when Samia started, she had the influence and saw how John Magufuli was running the country. And she said, let me open a little bit. But then suddenly now people are talking about, and experts are saying that the influence of Jakaya Kikwete, a former president, in Samia Suluhu's government has returned the country backwards again to where it was supposed not to be, of closing the opposition, closing the media. And people are worried that Kikwete probably had too much influence in the government, that there was this situation of turnaround because the old guards of CCM took over from Samia. So it looks like that is one of the main reasons people are saying that Samia changed her course. And we hope that there will be peaceful structure right now, because what is happening right now, Tanzania, which has been a mirror of peace, development, hope, in the East African region now is faced with these changes. And the question is, the government has not been listening to its people. The Gen Z evolution, which we have seen all over the world, really. We have seen Gen Z in Kenya. We have seen in Madagascar this month. The Gen Z didn't want the president, and the military took over. We have seen Gen Z in Morocco recently, and they were crashed down, and now we are told that about 2,400 people have been arrested. So it looks like African leaders, once in power, they don't want to listen to the people. It's a richer time whereby we are back to, like, I feel like the Arab Spring, or back to 67 in the 70s, when the revolution of the youth taking over, and we saw a lot of changes. So probably we are going through that right now. Just to refer, recently we'll talk about the new Arab Spring, which started in Tunisia 2010, and now we are seeing it taking over in different places. We saw in Sri Lanka, we saw in Bangladesh. So it's a question, what is happening right now?
You bring up a very good point. It's like some of these leaders who are at the helm of these countries, they actually don't read or pay attention to what's happening globally, because they forget that the internet, in tandem with social media, has empowered the Gen Z, the youth. It has given them a voice. It has given them access to information. The youth in Tanzania read and see what is happening across the pond, in Madagascar, in North Africa, in Morocco, in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, all these places. They don't read and understand that the youth could actually use social media to take them out of power. So, based on where you are, we are hearing reports of internet being shut down. What are some of the challenges that reporters or even anybody trying to send information out of Tanzania are dealing with?
Well, it's a big challenge, and that's what we were trying to get in touch with people there. It is not, phones are not going through, but people have really ingenuity, because now I heard reports that some of the people in Tanzania are using internet from the neighboring country, Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, they're all together. So it looks like they have the possibility to a certain extent. Some people, they have all this VPN, and nowadays you have Starlink, where they can have internet easily. So it is a challenge to the government to close completely. It is true it is closed, but you can see there is a possibility to get information, because we're getting videos and news from social media. So the government is, I would say, a lot of steps behind the advancement of technology. That's one other issue which is putting back our governments and not making them on the scale of what the youth are getting. The youth have now, as you said, a new arm. They're carrying something which was not there available 20 years ago. So they are using the Facebook and the social media to get together, to call people to come out and demonstrate against the government. So it'll take a long time for the government to understand. So the leaders in Africa, up to now, I think it is very difficult to understand why they don't see this, why they didn't see this coming. And it shows that our leaders don't learn from experience. They just shut down, and they don't learn from what is happening. Nowadays, as you said, Madagascar just happened. In the Comoro, I'm hearing that people are just praying that we hope our country see changes just like Madagascar. Let's see changes like Dar es Salaam. And people are ready for change. But the government or the old guards don't see that at all.
When I was doing research for this show, I came across one of my favorite sayings from a guy called Victor Hugo. He once said that an idea whose time has come you cannot stop that idea. I'm literally paraphrasing what he said. It looks like this is the Gen Z's time. When you look across what's happening globally, the youth are on the edge. I think the youth are tired. You have a system that has been in power for over 60 years in power. They have not opened up to these young people. You have Tanzania is one of those countries that has a huge youth population, and these young people are not part of the system. They don't feel like they belong to Tanzania. They don't feel like they are part of a system that they have been a part of for the last 60 plus years. So, going back to the saying that I said, an idea whose time has come, could this be the time? Could this be the time when the Gen Z actually usher in change? Because change is not going to come by way of a ballot. It's definitely going to come through other means necessary. Could this be the time when these young people in Tanzania say, you know what, we've had enough and this is what we want?
I would say it is the start. It is the start for getting change. What is surprising is that when you talk of the youth, even CCM has a youth wing. But I think mostly is the fact that in our countries, in let's say developing countries or the South, there is this thing of respect. The elderly, the youth respect the elder. So the elder keeps the youth on the side and they don't listen to them. We just have to listen to our old people. And that culture, that way of living has created such a thing that the leaders don't listen, because CCM should have listened. Even if they didn't listen to the opposition or to the youth, they should have listened to the youth of CCM themselves, because the youth of CCM themselves are frustrated of how things are going. So that could be one major reason why you have problems. But coming back to your question, it looks like it is the start of the Gen Z bringing change. Because remember, in Kenya, the Gen Z tried to bring change, but they were stopped. Ruto is still in power. There hasn't been any big changes. So in Tanzania, the question is, how far will the youth go? How much time do they have? Do they have the real support? Because I've been thinking and looking into all this Gen Z's issues and comparing it to Arab Spring. One major problem facing the Gen Z is that they come out spontaneously and they don't have a leader to galvanize them and take over. So what happens, their revolution or their protest is taken over by others. Look in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood took over the energy of the youth and they failed. In Tunisia, it's the same thing. The youth demonstrated, but it's the old guard which took over. And this is because there is no unified force to bring people together to take over. And this is all known under dictatorship or one party system. Although Tanzania is a multi-party system, but when one party is in power, it kills the other oppositions parties and it creates a vacuum in leadership. So the opposition is always split because the ruling party tries to split the opposition. And at the end, when a change like this happens, the Gen Zs are lacking leadership. They don't have somebody to follow. Okay, you have Tundu you have other political leaders. The question is, who is going to take over? Tundu is in prison. He's not going to come out and help the Gen Z. So the Gen Z have to unite together, have a force, and face CCM. But CCM knows the structure, is well prepared for all this. This revolution is a start, but the question is, how far can they go? And when will the CCM government fall or accept the cry of the people and especially of the youth?
To your point, Shakua, how about people who argue that, for example, you don't need a leader? Because once you have a leader who can be identified as the leading that movement, they will crush that person. You see, you just talked about Tindelusu. You just talked about the other opposition leaders who are jailed. They will crush you. So maybe it's very effective not to have a leader, but you figure out how to organize and galvanize yourselves and protest peacefully. I don't advocate for anybody using violence, but there are other ways to protest and bring a certain level of pressure there.
Yeah, it is true if there's a leader, but it is also true that you can't have a leader out of a spontaneous organization like this. There are people who are going to take advantage. And the point I'm trying to make is that when you look at all Gen Z's revolts or protests all over the world, let's go to Madagascar. The Gen Zs were on the streets for almost 3 weeks. But look who took over. It's the military, because there was a vacuum. There was no one to take over and lead the Gen Z. So the, excuse me. So the army felt that to bring security and peaceful situation in the country, we better hold this thing for a certain time. But when they hold it, they take it for a long time. The same case happens in Burkina Faso. For almost a month, people were demonstrating, the Gen Z were demonstrating, but nobody came out from that. Nobody dared came out, and the military took over. It happened in Mali. Mali also, I'm not calling for a military coup or calling for a military leader, but the fact here is that it is so spontaneous, and because the ruling party has broken completely the political system, so you don't have a coherent leadership, you don't have a coherent group to plan, as you are saying, for example, to get organized. So they just spontaneously say, okay, let's say Madagascar, they were against the lack of water, lack of electricity, lack of services, and it turned out we want the president out. Suddenly, it just turned around. Morocco was because of hard life infrastructure. The youth were demonstrating and saying that the government is putting a lot of money to organize African games and soccer and not looking at social structure. And now they're crushed. So you end up not having a leader to take over. And that's what is the problem. How do you use the energy of the youth who are not prepared politically to take over or to bring change? The only thing which can bring change, probably like Tanzania right now, the only way we can see change is to create a national government of unity. That is the only way out from this, which will bring together all the parties concerned, the political parties, youth, civil society, sit together and create a new government of national unity. That's one way out, to avoid any coup, to avoid any military, to avoid any type of violence. But you need somebody to come out and talk about that. And that is what is lacking.
But to your point, again, we've seen governments of national unity come in right across. In Kenya, we had a government of national unity between Raila Odinga and Mwai Kibaki. In Zimbabwe, we had Morgan Tsvangirai and Robert Mugabe. Nothing worked.
Yeah, it depends on the structure, how they put it. It is true when you give examples of those during that time, Tsvangirai and Mugabe, the period was not ripe as we are ripe today. It depends on the structure. Look in Zanzibar. Zanzibar, they have government of national unity. The elections there went on well because the government of national unity now for 10 years in Zanzibar, although they are saying that the government is still rigging the elections, because when you look at the ACT, Wazalendo and Chadema and meetings, they have a big following. But at the end of the day, the ruling party still dominates. But you see there is a process. Look at how the elections were held in Zanzibar, which is part of Tanzania, and what is held on the mainland. And you can look and say, can this work? If the ruling party is honest and respects the agreement, respects the conditions put when the government of national unity is created, then there is a chance. In Kenya, it failed because there was dishonesty between the leaders of the two sides. And it was some feeling not included, some feeling they were excluded. And another main issue is that the Kenya and Zimbabwe, you had the same old guards in there, and you had those who were protecting themselves because of corruption. rampant corruption is another big problem. Tanzania, there is a big problem of rampant corruption. So the old guards trying to protect each other. When you look at people remaining in power, the main thing is to protect each other. So look at Cameroon. President Paul Biya, 92 years old. It's not him who wants the elections.
Right.
It's the people around him who's holding power. And now you have demonstrations there too. So you have a problem
82 as
that,
well, you know?
pardon?
Arasan Watala, 82 years as well.
Exactly.
I guess
So
maybe that's the age range of our leaders now.
yeah, it looks like, and they don't want to listen, but it's not the leaders. I don't believe it's the leaders themselves. I'll take example of Abdulaziz Bouteflika of Algeria. He was on a wheelchair for a long time. He had a stroke. And when they presented him for the next elections, he came out and said, you guys, I don't want to stand here anymore. What are you doing? I can't do anything. So he moved out. He realized by himself that, no, it's not right. So you need leaders who are really patriotic, who are really nationalist, who really think of their people to come up and say, okay, this issue here, we need to solve it differently. It needs for Samia to go one step high and say, hey, listen, guys, this thing is failing. We need change. And that's the challenge. Can we bring government of national unity? As you said, it's difficult, but then they have to be honest. The CCM have to be honest and respect the agreements they are going to put. The Zanzibar issue, the opposition is still complaining because they're trying to change the regulations of the elections, the rigging of the elections, but they're having a hard time. But they're still working together with the ruling party to make sure that the islands are peaceful. So probably that could be an example head forward, although they are saying that the ballot boxes are full of votes before even election day. So Mwinyi is expected to win, although opposition had more supporters than anything else. But also look at this. Most of the youth of the opposition were not issued voting cards because of very small issues and irregularities. And most of their supporters were not able to vote yesterday. So you can see the ruling party can use all sorts of tricks, but it depends on the level of the leaders we have, if they are ready to work together to bring peace and development in their country.
Shakur, in case you are just joining us, we are live and talking about the violence that has erupted across Tanzania after the country went to the polls on October 29th, which was yesterday, in an election that is now being overshadowed by violence and widespread unrest. Protests have erupted across Dar es Salaam and other major cities following the exclusion of two major leading opposition candidates from the presidential election. And my guest is my good friend, Aboud Shakur Aboud, a veteran journalist and former colleague at the Voice of America, who has been following and monitoring the situation very, very closely. Let me come back to you, Shakur. From a global perspective, how does this election in Tanzania, how can this image that we see bring about a stable democracy?
Well, from the global part of it is that I think so the whole world is surprised. The whole world, on one way or the other, is shocked to see that after a long, peaceful period in Tanzania, we are having a riot, we're having protests, and elections is an issue. So the whole world is surprised. The United States has called on its citizens to be cautious in Tanzania. I think the other people, the other countries will follow. We've seen flights being canceled going to Tanzania. So globally, people are going to watch and see that this country, which was quiet and moving on, has changed. What has gone wrong? So it's now that everybody is looking into it and saying, what's happening? Is this going to be a real problem for Tanzania? Is it a long time problem? How do we solve it? And I think people have already now realized that this Gen Z issue is not only Africa, is not only Tanzania, is worldwide, which means people need to think and rethink of new generation taking over. When you look at it, even in Europe, for example, things are moving very fast. There is a lot of demonstrations in France. They're calling for the President Macron to leave. In Holland, there is an issue of immigrants. Racism has taken power. Here in the United States, we had 7 million people demonstrating the other day because they're not happy with what the government is doing. So globally, it looks like there is a wave that the new generation, the Gen Z, people who were born between 2000 and 2012, are now realizing that we need change. The world situation has changed. Technology has taken over. Technology is causing probably a challenge where people were not prepared for this. Nobody was prepared for AI. And when you look here in the States already, yesterday you had like Amazon saying they're firing 4,000 people and other companies are firing people. Now you ask yourself, these young people who are working with these companies, what are they going to do? And probably we'll see a Gen Z in America. So it's an issue of what's happening in the world as a whole. How is the business world changing? How is the economy changing? How is the workplace changing? And that's a big challenge. So it's not only a Tanzanian issue, it's a world issue coming to our doors.
Great point. I could not agree more with that point, especially when you bring in the context of technology, how people are using technology to connect to social media platforms. I also brought in the element of artificial intelligence. That combination has all leaders around the world on their toes. And I bet you, if our leaders across the continent don't sit back and listen to what young people are saying, I think technology, artificial intelligence, in tandem with the social media platforms that are there, our leaders should watch out. Major changes could be coming their way. But that's besides the point. Back to President Samia Hassan. She assumed power following the death of John Pombe Magufuli, who was perceived as a reformer and very liked. He was a populist guy. People loved him. Has this uh, has this election or the images that we are seeing come out of Tanzania changed that perception? Or especially for
Yes, I would.
somebody who took over from John Pombe Magufuli?
I think so. Yes, it changes the perception because it's a big contrast. What Magufuli was doing and what Samia Suluhu Hassan was doing. Samia Suluhu Hassan, who was the vice president, this happening now is a big blow to change because when Magufuli came, people were happy that there was change in Tanzania. There was change against corruption. There was change against investment, fake investment in Africa, mineral struggle, because we know that such agreements have been causing war, especially, let's say, just next door to DRC. We are seeing what is happening. There's been war in Eastern Congo all this time, and this is because of the minerals in Eastern Congo. So what has come out now is that Samia Suluhu Hassan failed to continue what Magufuli was doing or what Magufuli started to bring change. And it's a big blow for Africa because she was the second woman to be president, and it brought hope that she might bring change. But unfortunately, it turned around and it's become one of the worst period of Tanzanian democratic changes since Tanzania followed multi-party system in the 90s. So it's going to look like she failed and brought down Tanzania and brought down the peacefulness which Tanzania experienced during almost 60 years of independence, 60 years since it got independent. So it's going to be a picture which is going to haunt her all her life. It's very difficult to imagine how she's going to get out of this. At the moment, it's too early to say what's really going to happen. Are they going to force through and say she won the elections? But then after this, how is she going to run the country? Because we have seen destruction in many parts. We have seen all those leaders in power who are considered corrupt and rich. We saw buses being burnt down, which belong to some ministers. We saw houses being burnt. So the question is, how are they going to bring back the situation which was there before the elections yesterday? So it's a very tense and uncertain situation for Tanzania at the moment.
Shakur, let's talk about the exclusion of the opposition figures. And I'm specifically talking about Tundu Lissu and Ruhanga Mpina, right?
Yes.
Has this been, obviously these people have been in jail for a long time, and the exclusion did not help, but does this undermine the process, the confidence, of the election itself? Can this, the exclusion of these candidates be seen as the trigger, as something that triggered these massive protests that we see?
Yeah, I would agree. The changes which Tundu Lissu has been calling for is what triggered really these elections protest. Because remember, before the election started and which led to his arrest, was that he said, without change, there will be no elections. So he was saying that we must change, number one, the electoral laws, which he felt was unfair. And then also the change of the constitution. They have been asking for the change of the constitution for quite a while. There was the Warioba's commission, which proposed a lot of constitutional changes, but it was not done. So it is, by all means, the trigger more than anything else. And the GNZ just took over. The supporters of Chadema and ACT Wazalendo followed. So the trigger of these protests definitely were caused by the question of constitutional change and electoral change. The Electoral Commission of Tanzania, the members are nominated by the president. The opposition said that's not fair. We need an open, free electoral commission elected by all parties, have members from all parties to be in there. So that was the trigger. And Tundu Lissu leading the cause, saying that we cannot have free and fair elections without doing changes to the constitution, without doing changes to the electoral commission. So it is the fact that he wanted the change, political parties wanted to change, and the youth took over.
How about you and I have had the privilege of covering these elections across the continent. We've traveled together to cover some of these elections. What message does this send to the other countries in the neighborhood that are about to have elections where the Gen Z are up and about? They are trying to, to see if these political parties that have held on to power can hold on to power anymore?
Well, the first message will be definitely for people or the leaders. It's a message to them telling them, you must listen to your people. You must listen to your youth. That's number one. Number two, the message is sending is that elections which are not well prepared, electoral commissions which are not in favor of the people, which are not neutral, which are not free, is not the way to go. So it can send that message, but the question is that will the message get to those leaders? Because we have seen the example, as I said, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, all of them have not listened, and they went on with the elections the same way. So we had these three elections, it happened. In Madagascar, they never listened. The only country which I'll say, which I will praise right now is Botswana. Botswana has been going on, and we have a new leader who the other day I saw him very angry against his ministers and the civil servants, saying they're not doing their due diligence to work and make change. They are afraid, trying to protect each other. We need a leader like him who has the guts to say we need change. So I think the real message here is people have to listen to what the country needs, to what the people need, because some are just basic rights. It's a question of getting water, getting electrical services. It is in Madagascar, it's in Kenya, it's in Tanzania, it's everywhere. Those problems exist and the governments just ignore. Rampant corruption. We see people getting rich. You ask yourself why no action is taken. Magufuli tried. He arrested a number of people, but no action was really taken after that. We didn't see any big names going to court or being put in prison during that time. So the question is, how do you handle this? We protect in Kenya. Corruption was so rampant. Ruto, we thought he's going to come in and bring changes, but never happened. So the issue still remains. What is blocking these leaders to see, to hear, or to understand what message and what is happening in their countries?
Earlier, you talked about how the internet has been blocked. How are journalists, how are bloggers, how are anybody concerned about Tanzania? How are they viewing this censorship, or how are they navigating the internet shutdown?
Right now, when you look at Tanzania, when you talk to reporters in Tanzania, for a while, reporters in Tanzania were really scared. It is well known. People are afraid because you will be taken action. There was a law when you just criticize and you see newspapers being closed down or radio station closed down for a month or two. I remember when we were reporting, when you talk to a journalist, no, I can't say that, because if I talk of that, they're going to close us down. So they were going through very difficult times. Media has been going through difficult times. You have some famous journalists who have flown the country, and they are in neighboring countries. So it is not easy for the media. It's not easy for journalists to work in Tanzania up to now. So what really most of them were doing were following the line of the government, following the line of the Chama cha Mapinduzi CCM party. But in reality, there was no freedom of the press as one would think. They were very careful on what they had to say, very careful on what they had to do. So people were depending mostly on bloggers and journalists outside the country. They would feed them, and then we would get the information which we would believe. So you would see that Tanzanian living abroad, journalists and media and bloggers were more trusted than Tanzanian inside, because they're the challenge to speak the reality. They speak the truth.
You know, I wanted to go back to the point you made earlier about social media becoming like a catalyst for political change across Africa. When you look at almost all these uprisings led by Gen Zs, they've been squarely organized on social media, whether it's on Instagram, on Facebook, on Discord, and all these other platforms. You know, TikTok. You have young people who are there who are trying to craft these messages. In the case of Tanzania, to what extent do you think social media played a critical role? Or was this something that has been simmering for a while, and because people could not vote the way they wanted to vote, or vote for who they wanted to vote, that triggered everything that we are seeing in Tanzania?
I think the social media had a big part in this. People were communicating on the social media. They were communicating on all the platforms which you mentioned, and that's how the message got through. The message for the protest was not sent by people talking in the streets. It was through the social media, and people got together through the social media, and that's how it all took place. I think, like everywhere else in Africa, Asia, social media has played a big role in bringing together people. They do meetings and they make calls on Facebook, TikTok, and people watch and they listen and they take action. So in Tanzania, I would say the mass media and the social media especially played a big role in calling for these demonstrations. A lot of people were skeptical about that it would take place because they were afraid that the police will come out strongly against them, which they did. But this time they did a daring action. They came out and said, we are going to fight for our rights. So the question is, we are fighting for our rights, and they got it through the social media. It played a big role in bringing them together.
I think fighting for our rights is the key word there. How are these ordinary people or young people coping with the curfew that is, I guess, across the country? And I was also reading earlier that now all civil servants have been instructed to work from home. How are people going about, trying to circumvent some of these things?
Well, we are here in the United States, we're Washington. It's very difficult to know what and how people are doing. As you said, the government asked the civil servant to work from home. So that's a sign that things are not good. Today, people in Tanzania, civil servants were working from home. As we know, in the major cities, everything is closed down. Businesses are closed down. People are watching, people are calling for prayers, and people are afraid to venture outside because the situation is not good. We are seeing burnings of buildings and businesses. According to information, most of the businesses which we are seeing being burnt belong to somebody who was in the government. So it's an issue which we have to follow very closely. With the internet not working, it's very difficult to know. We are trying to figure out what's really happening on the ground. And when you look at it, people are, for the second day, I think people are scared. People are in the houses, shops are closed, and I think people are just cautious, waiting to see what will happen. As I said earlier, the issue now here is who is going to take over from this protest? Because the army is there on the sidelines, if it is true. The Gen Zs have nobody there because Tundu Lissu, one of the leader, is in prison. And who is the wise man to come out and say, listen, let's sit down and talk? That's what is expected. Otherwise, this demonstration looks like they are going to go on for a couple of days.
We are almost out of time, but let me ask you maybe two more questions. What you've covered President Samia Suluhu Hassan for a while now. You understand the politics in Tanzania. From your vantage point, what's her political strategy amid this growing domestic and international pressure that she has had to deal with?
Well, it's very difficult to read because as I said from earlier, the outside influence, the influence from CCM has overshadowed all her beliefs, all her policies. And it's very difficult to know what she wants to go ahead. She reacts more than coming out with a plan, coming out with suggestions. Even when she gives speeches, she uses proverbs and sayings, which sometimes is difficult even to understand. So covering her, most of the time, she has not spelled out exactly what she really wants domestically. Internationally, she has been calling for outside investment, but even then there were shady agreements. Especially she was leaning a lot on the Arab countries. We saw like selling national parks to foreigners, removing the Maasais from important areas, their own homelands. Those are the things which she did and gave power to foreign investment, especially Arab countries. So it is not clear where she was leading. She was trying to bring in tourism, international investment, but at the same time, most of the agreements were so shady, it's difficult to say what her real policy was. I think it's going to be difficult to determine and to know what Samia Suluhu Hassan really had in mind to develop the Tanzania, because even during her campaigns, you could see she was trying to defend. Most of the time, she was playing defense rather than coming out and attack, rather than coming out with particular plans on what she wants to do during the next 5 years if she was elected.
Now, looking ahead, what reforms do you think would be necessary to restore trust in the electoral system, to take those young people off the streets, and hoping that maybe the outcome of the election reflects the will of the people? What can we expect?
Well, as I said, it's not clear right now, but what needs to be done in Tanzania right now is for them to go back and make constitutional changes. The constitution needs change. The short term, I would say, they would need a government of national unity at this point. Government of national unity will probably solve a lot of issues and set forth a way, a path, a timetable for changes in Tanzania. Another important issue is to fight corruption in the country, to bring it down. It's quite rampant, and that needs to be taken care of. And the next step will be to listen to the Gen Zs, what they really want, what they really think. How do we plan for their future in the next 5-10 years? So all that needs to be done. People have to be brought to the table. Everybody has to come to the table and discuss a plan which will bring Tanzania to another new phase of democratic changes, new phase of development, new phase of investment. Tanzania is very rich with minerals. Tanzania is very rich with its people. They're very well ready to go on in the future. So there needs to be a plan to listen to everybody, and change needs to be done. And definitely that constitution needs to be changed.
Mhm. How about how might these developments that we see in Tanzania shape the U.S. Or even regional policy towards Tanzania?
Well, if you remember, Nyerere tried to bring Tanzania together, if I'm getting right your question, and he used Swahili as the base of unity. And I think what needs to be done is to break away with this regionalism, which was coming out during this Samia's period, and that has to be removed out of the picture, and make sure that Tanzania remains united as it has always been since its independence.
Well, Shakwa, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you very much for having me.
This is a different perspectives. We want to know what you think about the elections in Tanzania and the violence that has erupted across the country. Share your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And of course, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to me, Paul Dio, on Substack, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Stay tuned for this continuing coverage on this platform and across all our social media platforms. Thank you so much. Good night for now. Take care. Thank you so much, Shakwa.